when you control the central banks, you control society, particularly if the central bank is privately owned, as it is in the United States and in England and some other countries.
In fact, I've been reading, and I'm going to be putting my next couple of newsletters, Andrew Jackson's 1837 farewell address, and he talks about all of this, how the central bank at that time, could determine the future of the society. They could expand the money supply, they could contract it, they could determine whether people worked, whether they weren't hungry. The central bank was all powerful, far more powerful than the regular government, and people don't understand that, but it's true.
Well, I give you a piece from Congressman Louis T. McFadden's speech in 1934, and I'm just going to give you a few lines. I refer to the Federal Reserve and the Federal Reserve banks and board here and called the Fed. The Fed has cheated the government of these United States and the people of the United States out of enough money to pay the national debt. The depredations and inequities of the Fed has cost enough money to pay the national debt over several times. This evil institution has impoverished and ruined the people of these United States, has bankrupted itself, and has practically bankrupted our government. And it has done this through the defects of the law under which it operates, through the maladministration of that law by the Fed, and through the corrupt practices of the moneyed vultures who control it, and of course it goes on. And I have part of President Jackson's speech here as well. And we're going to win this one. We're going to win this one. This came from out of left field. The circumstances is allowing us to have a shot at the brass ring. It's the same circumstances that existed during the 1930s. But today, we have our own media, and we have the Internet. And they didn't have that then. And we are going to take the power away from the Federal Reserve. And when we do that, we will be able to stop what's going on. We also are going to have to implement tariffs on goods and services, because we cannot compete with countries that deliberately subsidize their industries and also deliberately depreciate their currencies. We have to have a level playing field. We have to have fair trade, and we haven't gotten it for a long time, and we want it back.
And, of course, I think the listener has to understand that most of the other countries subsidize their industry. We do not subsidize our industry, at least not most of our industries, and so that our steel can't compete on the world market with the Chinese steel that's subsidized by the government. And the same thing is true with so many of our other products. Why would that be? Why would they want an unfair market practice? Because they want, of course, to destroy our industry and transfer our manufacturing overseas. They've done this for years with the Japanese cars, and the Japanese cars were dumped on our markets at a lower rate than we could produce our cars. And of course, right now we're giving billions of dollars to General Motors, so that they can, of course, supposedly shrink their operation on down and produce fewer cars in America. But they're going to be producing them overseas and bringing them in the United States. In fact, General Motors recently announced that they were going to be bringing about 25% of their cars sold in the United States will be produced overseas. And I would ask our listeners, why are we giving money to General Motors so they can produce their cars overseas and create jobs overseas? And the answer should be quite obvious, because our leaders have no loyalty to America. They're loyalty to this idea of a one-world government, raising the living standards in China and in India and in Thailand, and lowering the living standards here. And you're going to find the price of your electricity going up, the price of your gasoline going up, the price of your food, everything's going up, and your wages are not going to increase. That's how they're going to lower our living standards. And do you think the average person has any idea what's going on, Bob?
No, I think perhaps 60 to 80% of the population in every country, it really doesn't understand.
Well, I think you're doing a great job, and I saw that list of radio stations on. It keeps just growing and growing. I'm just so pleased that you're getting the word out all across the country on other networks to other audiences, because this is what it's going to take. And I know you must be exhausted. You do almost as much radio as I do.
Well, I'm very happy to do it. I love doing it.
I know you do. Well, Bob's been at this as long as I have. We've been at it, for close to 50 years, both of us. But we're lucky to have the opportunity to reach people. We'll be right back in just a moment here. If you want to give us a call, 1-888-24-LIBERTY. Moment here. Well, this is Dr. Stan, and Bob was simply saying that as far as the home loans are concerned, most people who had subprime loans who never should have been allowed to buy the house in the first place have lost their loans. We're talking probably about 3 million people. There was 2.25 million last year, and we probably lost in the 750,000 this year. Maybe, what do you figure, about 3 million, 3.5 million people lost their homes?
Yeah, that's a good guess.
And then, of course, she's just saying that now, but this is just the beginning. Now we've got the pick and pay loans. They're the people who certainly weren't paying the interest on their homes, and so the interest was mounting, and they were just paying the principal, or maybe they were paying the principal and not paying the interest, but certainly their amount they owe, it keeps going up every month. And then we've got the Alt-A loans. They're the liar's loans. And then a lot of people with even prime loans who lose their jobs are going to actually, of course, lose their property down the line because you can't make the payments. So pick the story up, Bob. They're trying to tell us things are getting better, but do you think there's going to be another wave of home foreclosures down the line?
Yeah, we're into it already, and it's going to last into 2012. I had previously thought it might end in 2011, but the situation actually is far more deplorable than I depicted in the fall of 2004, calling the top of the real estate market in the second 6 months of 2005. And fortunately, the subscribers who wanted to get out of their homes could because they'd been warned, and people who had extra dwellings that they rented out and things like that, they get out too. And I told people with commercial, what you don't need, get rid of. But anyway, the commercial has, in finality, 70% to go. They're down about 30%. Commercial really hasn't got hit yet. And the government's trying to put it off, and the government is going to buy some of these loans. Now, what the banks did is, Bob and Dr. Stan said, we want to buy that building over there for $100 million. And the bank said, okay, that's terrific. We'll lend, you don't have to put anything down. We'll lend you the $100 million, which they make up off their balance sheet, which they really don't have. And we'll charge you interest only for 5 years. This is very typical up until a couple of years ago. And now the 5 years are up, and the people who bought the buildings, Bob and Stan, can't make the payments anymore. And so the bank has to take them back. But the building is not worth $100 million anymore. It's worth $70 million. And it's probably going to end up being $30 million over the next 5 years. And so the government is saying, oh, my goodness, what are we going to do? And they're going to print more money, and they're going to try to hold up not only the banks, the brokerage firms were lending, the pension were lending, the hedge funds were lending. This has got major repercussions coming from it. And so we have a two-pronged problem, which is going to last at least 3 more years and maybe longer. And that's why you do not buy real estate of any kind until this thing is over with. It's an illiquid asset, and it's going to get more illiquid. You should be taking your money and buying gold and silver-related assets. And when we get to the bottom of real estate, there'll be some terrific buys, and your gold and silver will be worth a lot more than it is now. And if that is the case, you can buy a home for cash or a few coins or a stock certificate, whatever. And you'll own it. The bank won't own it, and you won't be making payments on it. Or maybe you'll buy 50 homes. Who knows? But this is what happened during the Depression. people who had gold, who had cash, were in a great position. And so you don't want to go out there and get involved in that because it's going to get worse.
Well, I think, it's very interesting that a lot of people, lost their jobs. They can't get another one. So they're 62 years old. They're just going ahead and starting their Social Security. Now, Social Security figured that these people would be working until they're 65. And so now these people, instead of paying into Social Security, they got to begin to drain Social Security. And of course, money isn't coming into Medicare. Medicare is not getting enough money to pay all the bills. And starting last year sometime, and they've tried to keep this secret from the American people, but Medicare is putting out far more money than it's taking in. That means that they've got to change the system. That's why all the push for so-called cutting expenses of medicine. We're going to give medical care to everybody and cut the expenses.